Hi, everyone. Welcome to Zoho Survey's webinar today. I'm Olivia Mangan, Analyst Relations Manager at Zoho. I'm here with Hari Krishnan, Product Marketer for Zoho Survey. And we're
Hi,
joined today we're joined today by the wonderful Michael Fauscette. Michael is a high-tech leader, board member, software industry analyst, and podcast host. He is the founder, CEO, and chief analyst at Arion Research, a global AI and cloud advisory firm, advisor to G2, board chair at Locator X, and board member at SpotLogic. Formerly, Michael was the chief research officer at unicorn startup G2, and prior to G2, Michael led IDC's worldwide enterprise software application research group for almost 10 years. He's held executive roles with 9 tech companies, including Autodesk and PeopleSoft, as well as 6 tech startups. And we're honored to have Michael join us today and excited to jump into the webinar to learn and discuss. Michael, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Olivia. I always feel a little bit like, oh, I hope I can live up to that. That was pretty. Anyway, but thanks everyone for joining. Really excited to talk about surveys and market research. And, you know, as Olivia said, I've been involved in the market research world of tech about 19 years or so now. And then before that, I ran professional services consulting and support organizations at several software companies. So I've been involved in surveys and market research for quite a long time. And I want to jump into this. So I just wanted to try to set the stage a little bit. And then from a agenda standpoint, once I go through just a couple of slides, well, actually 4 slides that by the way, you'll get copies of. There's a lot of words on some of those slides, and I did that on purpose so that it makes a good handout, but I'm not going to spend the time today talking through every bit of it, but I just want to kind of set that up for you. And, you know, one of the things that we talk about a lot in this business really is this idea of voice of customer, you know, where you're trying to understand your customers' needs, their pain points, their satisfaction, loyalty, brand perceptions, all those things. And then, of course, internally from your employees, another important contingency or stakeholder in your business. And, you know, the same thing there. You're really trying to understand their satisfaction, their how they fit in the culture, what they think of leadership, management, the work-life balance, all those kind of important trends that are key to employee satisfaction. And then, of course, the last bit and the piece that I spend a lot of my time on really is trying to understand the market around your company. So, you know, what are your what are your competitors' strengths? What are their weaknesses? Are there ways that you can, you know, use some of the information about their product against them because it's, you know, perhaps has a QA problem, or there's some customer service issues, or, you know, whatever. Any of those things that you can understand, you can use and you know, take advantage of for your growth and your own revenue and margin. So if we think about the data that makes up those voices, and you know, I love this idea that we're moving to a world where companies drive all their decisions off of data. Well, it's pretty easy to understand some of the data that you have in your business, right? So the digital sources, I mean, we get all sorts of real-time data off the web. We have a trove of all sorts of data about your customers and about your employees. In all of the different systems that you have, CRM systems and, you know, financial systems, transaction data, all those things, even down to purchase data, right? So now you can buy buyer intent data from companies like G2 or ZoomInfo, and you can add that data into the mix and use that to help, you know, you understand behavior of your customers, your prospects, and you know, other interactions online. But what we don't talk about quite as much is, you know, is the idea that a lot of the data that we care about is actually human source data, right? So we have primary research, which is the survey data we're talking about, secondary research, so that's using other people's survey data that you find, you know, online, and then just in general, you know, the data that you could get from talking to a customer, a prospect, or you know, you could do that in a focus group or an interview, but you can't really do that at scale. So that really brings us to, you know, how do you really uncover this data? And obviously you all are here to talk about surveys, so you know the answer. But I think that's important to think about this as this human sourced information that you need to fill out the rest of what you're trying to understand around your business, or what I like to think of as the information model. And it's critical to have, an intentional creation of an information model around your business. There's data around your product, there's data around your services, there's data around your employees, data around prospects. So all those things have to come together to provide you a picture that you can use to drive business decisions more effectively. And then if we think of that, then what are we trying to do? Well, like I said, I'm not going to read every one of these, but you get the idea. There's a lot of business outcomes that are tied directly to understanding this data, particularly the human source data. Data-driven decisions, of course, we said, but customer satisfaction, building better products, introducing new products or features. Which features do your prospects and your customers need or want? And then, from an employee perspective, how do I improve employee retention? Do I have employees that are at risk of leaving? Flight risk, compliance. Do I have any compliance risk? And then from a market perspective, how do I improve my brand positioning? How do I drive better strategic planning? How do I optimize those products so that they are that have the best product market fit that you can get, and they help drive your business? All of those things, pricing and packaging, all of those things bundled together to give you a really strong picture of all the things you can do if you have the right information model and if you can interpret that information model correctly. And then from a survey perspective, and I won't go through every one of these because we're going to talk about this a few times as we go through the discussion. But it's important to remember that survey is a practice. It's something that has been around for a while, and there are a lot of important bits of information around how you build this and what you do with the survey that are extremely important to getting the right data out, and frankly getting unbiased data, or getting data that doesn't mislead you as you're trying to interpret that data. So, what do I mean? Well, I mean, first of all, start with the end in mind. I guess that's an old Stephen Covey idea, but define clear objectives. Make sure you understand what you're trying to do. Keep the surveys focused, short, use very direct, simple language. I mean, all those things are really important, all the way down to things like piloting the survey to test it before you launch. Make sure that you're clear about your privacy policies, data retention, all those things around it, so that your participants feel comfortable. And even down to simple things like having progress indicators on your survey, so that people don't get frustrated if it's longer than they expect, or they don't know where they are. And overall, there are things that underneath the survey that are really important, like how do I design this so that I get the responses I want from the people, from the audience I want, and then how do I design it so that those those respondents will actually complete the survey, right? Because if they don't complete the survey, you don't have the data you need. You're not really, being effective. So all of those things bundle together into survey best practices. Now, like I said, we're going to talk about that more as we go into this from a more of a interaction discussion perspective. So I'm going to turn this over to Hari now, and Hari and I are going to have some fun talking about some of the different things around survey. You're muted, Hari.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible now.
You are.
Okay. So before we go ahead with that, I would like to remind the audience that if they have any questions, they can use the question tab at the bottom of the screen, or they can wait for the Q&A session at the end. So yeah. So thank you, Michael. Those were some really powerful insights, and so you made it clear that data is the backbone of effective decision making. So let's explore some of these ideas further. And building on what you shared, how do you think companies should leverage survey data to identify emerging trends and competitive threats in a specific market?
Sure. Well, that's actually one of the pieces that I get really excited about because, like I said, I've been doing market research for quite a long time, and have run surveys like this, off and on for customers, for clients, for years. And I think it's important for a few things. One, you're really looking for opportunities, you're looking for threats, you're looking for issues with your competitors, that sort of thing. And if you target your questions, and this goes back to the beginning with the end in mind, what are you trying to accomplish? But more importantly, who are you trying to get the data from, right? So human source data. I want to make sure that I know either, I'm going after my ideal customer, ICP, or I'm going after, maybe I have a competitor that's expanding in a market that I don't normally go into, and I want to understand that. Customer preferences, satisfaction data, competitor shortfalls, poor release quality, execution, that sort of thing, and also purchasing behavior. If you have those, you can start to figure out trends. And trends are not a one-time thing, right? So what I'm really saying here is you want to build this into a program. When I'm doing market research, I want to think about this an ongoing process that helps me build those trends, understand those trends, and then take advantage of those trends inside of my business planning, my strategy, my product strategy. How am I going to market? What's my sales process? All those things are really important. And if you find those trends, you can get to an outcome that'll really help the business. And then lastly, and I'll say this a few times during this, but because of where we are today with artificial intelligence and all the things that have happened with it over the last couple of years, but before that, even obviously traditional AI, because we have the capability to analyze large data sets, even unstructured data sets, in a very different way, so that we can get help from the machine, from the AI, to actually help us find those signals, particularly weak signals that you may or may not see if you're analyzing the data yourself. But if you're using a really good analytics tool that can see this trend over time, then you'll have the capability to really extract those trends and then come up with actionable plans to use them to drive different parts of your business.
That's great, Michael. So survey data can help you identify these intricate trends and patterns. And I believe that the quality of insights you gather depends on the quality of the surveys you create or design. So my next question to you, Michael, is what do you think are the key elements of effective survey design that will ensure that the data collected is reliable and actionable for market research?
Sure. Well, that's actually the $1 million question, I guess, isn't it? That how do you do this effectively to make sure that you're going to get what you want? And it does come back to those basics that we looked at a few minutes ago in best practices. But let me think about the ones that are most important to this question. And again, I start with that one very specific up front. And this is probably the place I've seen companies fail most often, was not having clear objectives for what they want to get out of the survey that they're trying to build, right? So you have to identify ahead of time what you're trying to find, even though you're not going to know, you're not going to know what the answers are going to be. At least I suspect you won't. But you need to understand so that you can build your questions in a very precise, unbiased, and designed to get that specific actionable response. And then I would say the next piece is because as one of the big problems with surveys is either people don't answer them at all, or they answer part of them and then fatigue sets in and they don't complete that survey, so you don't actually get all the data you're looking for. And so I think it's important to mix up the types of questions that you use, and this is where a survey tool comes in really handy, right? Because it has all these different question types already, and you can use them to build out some closed-end questions, some multiple choice, some different lists and rankings and those kind of things, all the way down to just open-ended questions, because obviously there are some things that I want to understand. How do you feel? I'm trying to get beyond the fact into emotion. And if I elicit that response in an open text kind of format, a lot of times I can then use the AI to analyze that from a sentiment perspective and understand how you feel when you're taking the survey or when you're responding to questions about using this product. And then I really talked about again about the audience, but this is actually a tricky part. Who is it you want to talk to? And one of the things that I see, one of the problems that I've seen in the past is you can be too specific, and you actually will then shape your results, but you could also be too general. So you need to figure out that that balance of, oh, I need manager level people at this kind of company in this region or whatever, or I need manager and above, or I just want executives, or I want, end users of, and that sort of thing. So understanding who you want to talk to and the voice that they're going to use is really important. And pre-testing, we mentioned that, but you'd think that would be a no-brainer, but I know it's a step that I see skipped often, and that is run that survey with a small audience to make sure that you head off any of those problems before you actually go live with it to that broader audience. So trending, in building this programmatic response, all these things come together to make it an effective survey. But then you also want to think about things like frequency. Do I do this over time? Am I trying to trend? Is it one time? Is it a question and answer about a specific interaction, or is it about a general use case? Those kinds of things. So a lot of really good information out there about surveys, but I think those are the key kind of underlying tenets that really help you be effective.
Fantastic, Michael. So those were some really good points and tips on designing better surveys. Now, if there's one area where survey data can be extremely valuable, it would be customer experience. So, Michael, in your experience, what are some of the most effective ways to use survey data to enhance customer experience and loyalty?
Well, I mean, there's several things that I think we can think of there, but I'm going to start by saying something that I think is a mind shift a bit for some companies, and that is that assessing customer experience needs to cover the whole customer journey, and it needs to have different points in that journey where you're asking the questions, and then it needs to be programmatic or systematic. It needs to be something that I built into the DNA of my company. So, like, for example, every time we have a customer service interaction with a customer, they get a short survey to understand if they had their problem resolved. Seems a simple thing, but it's not necessarily something everybody does. But then there are others, like, how about if you're a technology company and you've sold some software? Maybe most companies get productive with that software 6 months after you go live. So you have a programmatic survey that goes out at 6 months after they go live, and then you have one that goes out maybe at the renewal, 90 days before renewal or whatever. But the idea is, think about this in a programmatic way, because I need to understand the customer and the customer's pain points and behaviors across that whole journey. And then I think, that ability to ask at different touch points, you can gather those insights into what's working well, what needs improvement. And, you can change service delivery, you can change your product, you can add product, you can find opportunities that are adjacent to your product, or maybe even how you're communicating isn't that effective with the customer. They want to use their own channels. You force them onto a web form, or you force them to use chat when they'd rather talk on the phone or whatever. But you need to understand that, right? And then lastly, segmenting those results, by demographics, and behaviors can help you really tailor your experiences to those different customer groups. So if you can build a more personalized experience that meets my individual needs and the things that I've both indicated to you directly, told you, or also from my behavior, so you're combining both, then you're going to increase loyalty, and you can really personalize those interactions. And every time I survey customers and I ask them about personalization, that's very high on the list these days of things that I want out of my relationship. And the only way you can do that is to have enough data to really understand what that individual is looking for and then serve that up in whatever interaction it might be.
Okay, interesting perspective, Michael. And the thing about customer experience, and I'm sure you will agree with me, it's that it can be influenced by subtle factors, and the surveys can help you pinpoint these factors. They can tell you what's going right, what's not, and if we get a bit deeper into CX, customer experience, we'll find that personalization is key. People just love getting personalized experiences. So could you discuss the role of surveys in helping companies develop personalized marketing strategies?
Sure. Yeah, that, and I hinted at that a little bit in the other question, but this, to think about this more specifically, what's the role that the survey is really trying to play? Well, you're trying to gather this detailed information about things that are difficult to get just from behavior, customer preferences, intended behaviors and likes, like I mentioned, the communication issue before, all of those kinds of, data and motivation. Why is the customer engaged with you? Why do they continue to renew? Why do they use your product? Whatever that might be. And then, create that data, that information model, and then you're using that information model to build out segmentation. And obviously you're augmenting the survey data with other customer data that you have, but the combination of that then lets you really segment down to a much smaller segment of the population. And that means you can offer more personalized experiences. And, I've seen companies go wrong with this off and on for years when they would make the segments much too large, or they would use the wrong indicators of the behavior that put you in that segment. And that actually works against you. If you personalize in a way that isn't really meeting the needs and the intent of the prospect or the customer, then you hurt your customer experience versus help it. And then, also you can use those surveys to understand things like customer values. What are customers interested in? And that way you can use that in your marketing to make that campaign much more relevant, much more engaging, and then you can deepen the customer relationships and really build your brand loyalty around that. So, I think personalization is key. In fact, frankly, I like to use the word individualization to change the idea from those wide segments down to much narrower segments that can be much more effective when you're talking to that segment.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So we saw that survey data can help you with market research, customer experience. But I think one aspect that is often overlooked is employee engagement. See, because you cannot provide your customers with exceptional experiences when your company is not in a position to do so. So, Michael, my question is, how can companies use survey data to identify areas for improvement in employee experience, and what impact would it have on the overall business performance?
Sure. That's a hot topic among customer experience analysts and employee experience analysts, and it's been going. It's a conversation we've had for years. Does the employee experience relate somehow to that customer experience? And personally, I think that's absolutely the case, right? That if you have motivated, engaged employees that are satisfied, they're much more likely to build a better experience for your customer. And I think it's just human nature. You can't, if you're upset about something, it's very difficult for you to open up and be empathetic to somebody else's problems because you're thinking about something about yourself. So if you analyze the data, you can find areas, simple things like maybe there's some work environment problems, maybe there's some issues in the culture that isn't really working for some of your employees in a way you expected, or maybe leadership isn't as effective as you thought, or maybe some of those employees are flight risk or professional development opportunities so they can learn more. I mean, all those things are things that you can learn by asking. And and I'm a believer in asking more often too, frankly. I think, some companies, you do an annual employee survey. That's just simply not enough. And one of the things, if nothing else, it shows that you're really only thinking about this once a year when you're going through the raise, evaluation cycle. And that's not really what you're trying to do. You're really trying to have an ongoing conversation with those employees that helps you understand, are they engaged? Are they satisfied? That'll lead to improved productivity. It reduces turnover. It definitely improves and impacts your overall business performance. But then, like I said, even more importantly, you deliver better service and you interact better with your customers. You're more innovative. You can contribute more to positive company culture. If you are satisfied with your situation, that helps you drive that higher customer satisfaction.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So these are some of the ways surveys can help you foster a positive and thriving work environment.
Mhm.
So we saw that survey data can be a gold mine for improving market research, customer experience, employee experience, but that is only if the data can be interpreted properly. So, Michael, could you tell us what are some common pitfalls companies face when interpreting survey data, and how they can avoid making decisions based on misleading insights?
Well, there are two areas in this, under these like pitfalls, that I think are absolutely essential to dig into and understand. And the first of them is not going to be something. I mean, I think probably everybody's heard the term confirmation bias before, or at least most people have. But what I mean by that is, if you're looking at the data, you often you have a tendency to focus on the data that confirms the things that you already believed, and you tend to ignore data that contradicts you, right? So in other words, if I'm building this survey and I know what I'm trying to discover, I have to make sure that I don't build in and color the responses by the way I ask the question, by the types of questions I ask, by the way I interpret the data. So confirmation bias is one of the most insidious things, because it is very difficult for you as an individual to understand that you're misinterpreting, because that data that doesn't fit your paradigm, your way of looking at this problem, is discounted, because you expect a different outcome, and so you're looking for things that confirm that. That's very dangerous. And then the second one is correlation versus causation. And a lot of times you look at data, and you see this all the time in journalism, in politics, all those sort of different places where you can look at data and you say, okay, if A, then B. Well, but what if they happen simultaneously, but they really aren't connected? So in other words, they correlate, but they really aren't caused by each other, one or the other. So if you misattribute a cause when it's really just a correlation, you're going to make faulty conclusions and you're going to take faulty actions, right? So how do you do this? How do you change that? How do you fix that? Well, you have to approach the data with an open mind, and you have to be able to look for unexpected outcomes, unexpected patterns, validate your findings with other data, and use, other research methodologies to get there. And it's even, down to the sample size and representation, because you want to make sure that you're getting that broad picture that will in fact yield that data that could be the cause, or could be a correlated fact, or that is, a contradictory idea to what you held in your, own mind as to the outcome. Because what I'm really trying to do is get to some version of the truth that can help me, avoid making bad decisions. I can get to the decision that'll actually help me. And then lastly, I'll add in that one of the things that I think is exciting about AI, and about using AI from an analytics perspective in this, is that you can use that as a way to help you find out that data that is contradictory to your opinion. Now, you also have to be careful with that because, as we know, there are some ways if you prompt generative AI types of tools that you could get it to confirm what you wanted. So you could build confirmation bias into the output there too. So you have to be careful with that, of course. But I think in general, being able to analyze that data in a much more effective way, and then understand where that data is contradictory and valid, can really lead to some superior outcomes from your survey data and from your use of that survey data, because you've gotten past that incorrectly held belief, and you get to the outcomes that really can change your perspective on what you're doing.
Okay, Michael, thanks. And so these are some of the tips to avoid common pitfalls and to make sure that you get the best out of your service. So finally, Michael, so as you know, I'm from Zoho and we offer more than 50 business applications. So I guess the discussion would be incomplete if we don't talk about integrations. So how do you recommend companies integrate survey data with other sources like CRM and gain a more holistic view of market trends and customer behavior?
Yeah, I hinted at that in the slides when I was talking about the information model. So let's go back to that for a second, because I think that concept is really useful when you start to think about your biggest asset, your data. How do you approach that in a way that lets you use that data to drive the right decisions? Something I call decision intelligence, and that really comes down to pulling all the data together, the digital source data and the human source data, and accurately combining that data. And even, I mentioned purchase data. There's outside data that you can get. There's all sorts of data available. But if you can't build that into a single model around whatever issue you're trying to solve, then you're really not going to get the complete picture, and you're going to get misled by the data, which is obviously something that we're trying to avoid. We want to use the data to drive the right decisions, and its value comes from being able to do that. Well, the more you can enhance it with other data sets, then the greater the chance is it'll reveal those, both correlated and causation from the customers, what they say, what they do. A lot of times behavior from some of your, tools around instrumenting your website or your product or whatever that might be, those can provide a view that's different than what I tell you. I may tell you one thing and behave a different way, and I need to be able to see both halves of that so that I can understand that the behavior, actually, the outcome is a bit different than what you're telling me in just one set of that data. So combining the data sets can really help you reveal what customers, the true intent of the customer or the employee, whatever it is we're trying to get to. But from a customer perspective, you have a lot of data, everything from transactions all the way to social data. And if you add that into your survey data, you can build a really rich picture, and then use a good data visualization tool and analytics platform with AI, because again, those capabilities from artificial intelligence can really enhance your analytics, and even go to the point where you can interact with your data in a much more natural way to find these trends, to find the causation, which is what you're really trying to get to. So I'm a big proponent of eliminating data silos, and frankly, we've created a mess in a lot of businesses by having all of these different cloud solutions from different providers that aren't integrated already. And so we create all these data silos, and then it's a real IT effort, a heavy lift, as it were, to combine those back in a way that's effective. But if I can have this in an integrated data model, then that's going to make this much simpler for me to get all the data into one place in that information model, and then use that to drive the right outcomes for my business.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. So I'm sure the information you shared today is going to help a lot of people. And I think we can go over to the Q&A session. So attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. And Michael, if you see any question that you want to answer, please
Okay.
feel free.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll flip through these and see.
So Hari, you can ask those questions to Michael, so he will answer it.
Okay.
So, Hari, here's one that I think we should probably bring up, because this is actually one of those things I get a lot, and that is it a recommended practice to incentivize survey participation in order to achieve better quality responses? The answer to that is maybe, and I hate that. That's a consultant answer, right? But the answer is it may be in your best interest to offer a small incentive, but best practices around incentives are very specific, and there's some really good available guidance from several market research organizations internationally that'll tell you that balancing incentives to a point where it helps you get responses but doesn't encourage bad behavior. So in other words, and this is something I learned very well at G2 when I was building out the survey. The reviews on G2 are driven by a 36 question survey that I built years ago, and one of the things that you have to be careful, that's a lot of questions, so that's way beyond the 20 questions that I would recommend to you as a maximum, right? But we're trying to get this data. So what we learned was that, first of all, a small incentive, $5, $10, $15 gift cards, that works really well. Another thing that worked really well was instead of offering to give them something, offering to do something that they value. Like, here are 3 charities. We'll make a donation in your name with $10, $15 to the charity. That's a great incentive, and people really, really respond to that effectively. But what you don't want, and we actually at one point we had to build a policy and go out to some of customers and say, look, if you're incentivizing more than $25 or whatever the number was, I don't remember exactly, then we won't allow those reviews to be posted. And that's because you're paying for the review at that point, right? If I'm giving you $50 to do this, that doesn't make sense. And then the other thing you have to think about is, where are your respondents? Because the incentives change based on the location of your respondent. And what's valuable to a person in New York City may not be as valuable to a person in Shanghai. I mean, it's just a different audience, different culture, different thing. So you have to tailor your incentives to the audience that you're going after. Now, like I said, you don't always have to incentivize. I particularly think in small, quick surveys, there's no point in doing that, right? I'm a customer. I called you about a problem, and then I get a 2-question survey at the end to say, yes, you solved my problem, and I appreciate that, or whatever, right? So there are ways you can incentivize. There are ways you should incentivize, and then there are times when it just doesn't make sense to incentivize.
Okay, Michael. And here's another interesting question. So, what is the ideal number of survey questions for C-suite executives?
This is one of those terrible consultant answers again. Enough to get what you want and not too many. So I always use, I'll tell you, when I build a survey that is fairly comprehensive, I use a maximum of 20 questions. I have gone to 22, but I don't like to. And that includes nested questions. But what I would really tell you is that if you can stay between 10 and 15 questions, including your nested questions, you're going to get a much higher response rate. And that's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to get as many of that population that you're targeting to answer your survey. And so you want to be respectful of their time. That's how I like to think of it, right? They're a professional. They have a job. They don't have to answer your survey. Even if you're giving them a $15 Starbucks gift card, I mean, that doesn't buy you, more than 10 or 15 minutes. And so I think you have to think about it that way. Here's what I have. Here's what I want to get. And I can get those questions and really, really edit yourself down so that I'm getting the questions I need, so I get the data I need, but I don't go so far as to create fatigue and have a much higher dropout rate than you would normally.
Right. Thanks, Michael. And I see another one. Would you recommend anonymous surveys?
That's another depends answer, I guess, because it depends on what you're trying to do. I tend to not like anonymous surveys because I feel like that's another bit of respect, but at the same time, I think as a company, there are a lot of times, I guess this is self-serving because I own a market research firm, but a lot of times in especially in big surveys like that you're trying to use to understand competition, market, that sort of thing, it's more effective to have that come from a third party than it is from your brand. But then there are other times when it makes a lot of sense for it to come from your brand. Like when I'm asking if you're happy with my service, or I'm asking, if you use the product in this way, did it work correctly or whatever. I think those are important to have under your brand. But I do think there are good arguments for some of these surveys to be anonymous, or more importantly, be branded in a third party way so that you get some you get a bit of a halo effect from the brand of whatever, market research consultant or whatever it is that you're using, and it takes it a step away from your brand, so it's less likely to be biased if you do that.
Yeah, that makes sense, Michael. And here's an interesting question about NPS. So would you say that NPS is a good way to judge customer commitment and engagement?
This is a 25-year argument, I suppose. The answer to that is maybe, but
Yeah.
use it with other things. It's not a standalone tool. If you're trying to you think about this, and there used to be a thing we talk about where you ask the second question. So the first question is, would you? And that's an intent question. Would you recommend this product? It's intent. So you don't know if I did. All you know is that at that point in time, I'm happy with you and say, yeah, sure, I'd recommend it. But then 2 days later, I may go, I'm not going to recommend that. So what you really want to know is, did you recommend? Not
Yeah.
would you? Right. So I personally think that a survey with a little more detail to it than just those simple questions often will get you a better outcome. Now, is it a bad thing? No, definitely not. I mean, it can certainly help you directionally. It might even point out that, oh, I need to do a much deeper survey on this population because there is a problem. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give you a lot, to be honest. And it's almost like in some ways, it's like this bragging rights that you have, like, oh, I have a really good NPS. Of course, my customers are leaving me in droves, but but I got a good NPS score. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a mixed answer for that one, I think, but it can be effective, but it has to be used correctly.
It has to be used along with other metrics, because I might have had a bad experience with the company, but I would still recommend it to my friends. So yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, or your enemies. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're thinking at the time.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So do we have any more questions? And even if we missed any of your questions, there's nothing to worry. We have taken it down, and we'll be sending you an email along with the webinar recording. So I guess we'll just wait for a minute.
Hari, there are a couple more that I'm seeing that are unanswered.
Okay.
Are you seeing those as well? Perhaps we can run through some of these. Let's see.
Okay. So what is the most effective way that we can drive better survey participation?
I think I sort of answered this already, but I'll hit it again to make it a point here. I think the best way that you can drive better participation is to tailor that survey down as short as possible to get what you want, but not not fatigue the respondent. But certainly incentives can also be a way to do that. It's just you have to use those best practices, because again, if you're paying $50 per survey, first of all, it's just really expensive. That makes no sense. But secondly, you're definitely coloring the results. And honestly, you'll get bad behavior. I mean, we've discovered, people using bots to answer surveys so that they can get, all those gift cards instead of just one, and like all sorts of bad behavior around it. So, I want to do the right thing. I want to build this out in as short as possible, but focused. And I know the target audience. I'm effectively, targeting them, and I build a survey that really gets me what I'm trying to do. And then in some cases, I'm incentivizing in a very intelligent way what I want to do so that I do get to the answers that I want that'll be effective.
All right. Thanks, Michael. And Olivia, do you think I have missed any question? Maybe you can.
No, I think we're good. Some of the other questions Michael has already addressed. So
Yeah.
if there aren't any other live questions, we'll wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Michael and Hari. This was a really insightful and fun discussion. We'll be sending out Michael's slides as well as a recording of this webinar after the fact. And please feel free to reach out to our team with any additional questions. But again, thank you everyone for joining, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks,
all.
Michael.
Thanks.
Everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.